On a single, sweltering afternoon, an empire's invincibility will be burned to ash. 20,000 men, two-thirds of the Eastern Roman field army, the veteran legions, the elite cavalry, the pride of a superpower that has dominated the known world for half a millennium, are about to be annihilated. They march now under a punishing August sun, not as conquerors, but as lambs to a slaughter they have arranged for themselves. Their emperor, a man driven by pride and insecurity, leads them into a trap his own generals begged him to avoid. They are marching against an enemy they do not understand, a desperate people pushed to the edge of starvation by Roman corruption, a people who have nothing left to lose. In a few short hours, the disciplined masters of war will descend into chaos, while the so-called barbarians will execute a masterpiece of tactical patience. By sunset, 20,000 Roman soldiers will lie dead or dying on the Thracian plain. Their emperor will be wounded, hunted, and consumed by a mysterious fire, his body vanishing from history forever. This is the story of that day. The day the world changed. The day the myth of Rome died at the Battle of Adrianople. The 9th of August, 378 AD. Dawn breaks over the plains of Thrace, promising a day of suffocating heat. The air is already thick and still as the legions of the Eastern Roman Empire stir from their camp near the city of Adrianople. There is no grand speech, no heroic call to arms. There is only the grim, familiar ritual of preparation, the clink of metal on metal as thousands of men don their armor, heavy shirts of mail or scale that offer protection at the cost of breath. They strap on their gilded ridge helmets, the morning sun glinting off polished iron. They take up their great oval shields, the painted emblems of their legions, a splash of color in the dusty brown landscape. At their hips hang the long spatha, a slashing sword that has replaced the old stabbing gladius of their ancestors. This is the face of the late Roman war machine, professional, equipped, and on this day, fatally arrogant. Their emperor Valens marches among them, a man in his late 50s chasing the ghost of his younger, more popular nephew, the Western Emperor Gratian. Gratian's veteran legions are only days away, but Valens will not wait. Flatterers in his court have whispered that the glory of this victory should be his alone, and so he gives the order. The army will march. He makes another choice, a small decision with catastrophic consequences. The baggage train, with its vital reserves of food and water, will be left behind to lighten the advance. The legions form up. The standards are raised. They begin the 8-mile march into Oblivion. Every step is a reminder of the people they march against, not a foreign army, but starving refugees of their own making, a people pushed across the Danube 2 years prior by the terror of the Huns, only to be met with Roman corruption and cruelty. The Romans had turned a paradise into a hell, and in doing so, they had forged an army of vengeance. Now, that army waits. The sun climbs, becoming a merciless eye in a cloudless sky. The temperature pushes past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Thracian terrain is rough and unforgiving. For 8 miles, the Roman column crawls forward. Dust, kicked up by thousands of hobnailed boots, rises in a choking cloud, coating everything in a fine grit. It clogs their throats and stings their eyes. Sweat pours down their faces, stinging the salt into their skin. Under the weight of their armor, the men are baking alive. Thirst becomes a physical torment, a clawing need that dulls the senses and saps the will. They are marching toward an enemy they believe to be a disorganized band of 10,000 warriors, a gross underestimate fed to their emperor by his scouts. They have no idea what truly awaits them. In the early afternoon, the Romans finally see it. On a low hill ahead, the Gothic camp. It is not an open collection of tents, but a fortress of wagons. Hundreds of heavy carts chained together in a great circle, a defensive laager that protects their families and their possessions. From this elevated position, the Gothic chieftain, Fritigern, looks down upon the exhausted Roman lines as they struggle to deploy. He is a master of patience and deception. He knows his greatest weapon is not the spear or the sword, but time. His most powerful asset, the heavy Grotthungi and Alani cavalry, is not in the camp. They are miles away, foraging, and he needs them to return. So, he begins to play with his enemy. He sends his warriors out to set fire to the dry summer grass in the valley between the two armies. A wall of thick, acrid smoke billows across the field, obscuring the Roman view, stinging their eyes, and adding the heat of the flames to the already oppressive heat of the sun. The legionaries, parched and weary, are tormented further. Then, Fritigern sends envoys to the Roman camp, pretending to negotiate for peace. Valens, perhaps having second thoughts, agrees to the talks. For the Roman soldiers standing in formation, this delay is maddening. Their strength drains away with every passing minute. They stand and bake in their iron cages while the Goths rest. And with every passing minute, the thunder of hooves grows closer. Fritigern's strategy, to use the environment itself as a weapon, is working perfectly. The sun, the smoke, the thirst, and the maddening delay are degrading the Roman army's greatest asset, its discipline, and then it finally snaps. On the Roman right flank, two elite cavalry units, the Scutari, have had enough. Frustrated by the endless waiting, convinced they can break the Gothic line themselves, they act without orders. They spur their horses forward in a rash, unauthorized charge. The fragile Roman battle plan shatters in an instant. This single act of indiscipline is the spark that ignites the inferno. Seeing their comrades engaged, the rest of the Roman line begins a chaotic, disorderly advance. The cavalry on the left wing surges forward, far outpacing its own infantry, leaving them dangerously exposed. The entire Roman army is now committed, moving up the slope toward the wagon wall in a ragged, uncoordinated wave. And at that exact moment, Fritigern's trap is sprung. A vast cloud of dust appears on the horizon, rising from behind the hills. Out of that dust emerges the missing Gothic cavalry. Thousands of Grotthungi and Alani horsemen, fresh and rested, descend upon the battlefield. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, a soldier himself, wrote that they came down like a thunderbolt from the lofty mountains. They do not aim for the center, they aim for the exposed flank. They crash into the overextended Roman left-wing cavalry with the force of an avalanche. The battle turns into a slaughter. The Roman cavalry on the left, surprised and overwhelmed, simply dissolves. They break and flee in a full-blown panic, abandoning the infantry to their fate. The Roman foot soldiers, the legionaries, are now in an impossible position. They are exhausted, choked by smoke, demoralized, and now their flank is wide open. The full weight of the Gothic army, infantry from the front, cavalry from the side, crashes into them, but the true horror is yet to come. The victorious Gothic horsemen do not stop. They wheel their mounts around the collapsing Roman formation and slam into its rear. The legions are now completely surrounded. What follows is not a battle, it is a massacre. The encirclement becomes a killing box. The Roman soldiers are packed so tightly together they can barely raise their arms to swing a sword or use their shields. There is no room to maneuver, no space to form a defensive line, and no path for retreat. Gothic lances punch through shields and mail. Swords and axes rise and fall in a relentless rhythm. The Roman lines collapse inward, becoming a single, helpless mass of men, crushed by the pressure from all sides. High-ranking officers are cut down where they stand. Sebastianus, the general who had urged Valens to fight, is killed. 35 military tribunes, the core of the army's command structure, perish in the carnage. It is a catastrophic decapitation of leadership and experience. As the sun begins to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the plain, the butchery continues until darkness finally falls. By then, 2/3 of the Eastern Roman field army lies dead or dying. It is a defeat on a scale not seen since the Battle of Cannae, more than 500 years before. In the heart of this swirling chaos, Emperor Valens is fighting for his life. He has lost his horse, his elite imperial guard has been annihilated, and he is now on foot, a 58-year-old man in heavy armor, fighting among the last of his soldiers. As the battle turns into a full-scale rout, an enemy arrow finds him, and he falls, wounded. What happens next is shrouded in the fog of war, a story that becomes a dark legend. The most accepted account, recorded by Ammianus, tells a desperate tale. A small group of his remaining bodyguards managed to drag the wounded emperor from the thick of the fighting to a small, nearby farmhouse. They barricade themselves inside, hoping to tend to his wounds and escape under the cover of the approaching night. But they were seen. A band of Goths, having no idea that the Emperor of the East is inside, piles dry wood and straw against the walls and sets it ablaze. The farmhouse is quickly consumed by fire. The body of Valens, Augustus of the Eastern Roman Empire, was never found. It simply vanished, consumed by fire and lost to history, a mysterious, ignominious end for the man whose pride led his empire to its darkest day. The Battle of Adrianople was more than a military defeat. It was a seismic shock that sent tremors across the entire Roman world. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The victorious Goths roamed freely across the Balkans, plundering the countryside, though they lacked the siege equipment to take the great walled cities. But the long-term consequences were far more profound. The empire had lost not just an army, but the core of its veteran soldiers, an irreplaceable reservoir of experience. The myth of Roman invincibility, the psychological weapon that had so often cowed its enemies, was shattered forever. The new emperor, Theodosius, was eventually forced to make peace in 382 AD, but it was a peace born of weakness. He could not defeat the Goths, so he signed a treaty that marked a radical and fatal shift in imperial policy. The Goths were allowed to settle on Roman land as allies or foederati. They would live within the empire's borders, but as a semi-autonomous nation under their own leaders, bound to Rome only by a treaty. This set a dangerous precedent. It was the beginning of a policy of outsourcing defense to the very people who threatened the empire, slowly carving away Roman authority from within. In those flames that consumed Emperor Valens, a new world was forged, and in that world, among the Gothic children who grew up hearing tales of the great victory at Adrianople, was a boy named Alaric. He would grow up a product of this new reality, serving Rome as a foederati commander. And when Rome inevitably broke its promises once more, it would be Alaric who would lead his people down the long road to Italy, to the gates of the eternal city itself, and in the year 410, accomplish the unthinkable. The disaster at Adrianople was not the end of Rome, but it was the beginning of the end. The fire that took an emperor on a Thracian field was a funeral pyre for the old Roman order, and its embers would light the way for the final fall. If you found this dive into one of Rome's most catastrophic days compelling, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of history's greatest turning points. Let us know in the comments, what do you believe was the single greatest Roman mistake? Was it Valens' arrogant decision to fight alone, the brutal march that exhausted his army, or the breakdown in discipline that triggered the fatal charge? We look forward to reading your thoughts. Thanks for watching.